Okay, so we are now live here. I think we have to make some adjustments here. We are now live with this comparison. I'm gonna make a comparison between the game one between Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen. Wherein at game one, Wesley So lost a very sorry loss for him in an opening which should have been to his favor, because I know that the Gyokyo piano is one of the bread and butter of Wesley. We have to adjust first these windows that we have here, and I'm going to make a comparison here between games 1 and 2, and I'm gonna load the game 1 for this first tab. Okay, we have here game 1, and this another tab we have game 3. Okay, so I'm going to the notation part of the comments. Instead of the comments, I'm gonna load the notifications. Okay, just bear with me, guys. I am adjusting the our view. I have a problem here. I think the view is a little bit of a challenge. Oh no, I closed it. Sorry guys, sorry. So this is Lansky of Pinoy Chess, and what are we going to do is to make a comparison between, so maybe we can just do it like this. Okay, we are going to make a comparison of the games of Wesley and Magnus last night. So the one on the left is the one won by Magnus. This is the first game. I think I have a hard time loading the second tab here. So it's unable to load. Let's try loading it again. Okay, we 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 can have it now. Let's change it to game 3. Okay, so this is the one won by Wesley. This game 3. I think we have to adjust the size. Oh, the other one is adjusting too. Okay. Okay, maybe I think the size is almost the same already. Uh, we can now, oh no, we can now make a comparison now. Uh, so we start with the starting position. So what happened last night is that uh, Wesley lost game one of match number one in the finals. He's facing Magnus Carlsen, and he essayed the Gyoko piano. I think Wesley is one of the experts of the white side of the Gyoko piano. I think even with the black side of that opening. And he lost that game. It's a very unfortunate loss. I think he's just made some miscalculations and wrong decisions on that game. But nevertheless, he was able to strike back immediately on the third game using the same opening, because of course at game 3 he would again be having the white pieces, and then after drawing the second game, using, I think it's the Berlin variation, and he immediately strike back at game 3 to level the score and have drawn the game 4. So they're even after the first day or after match 1, and they'll be having match number 2 tomorrow to determine the champion of this FTX tournament. So we start with first with game 1. So this is game 1. Okay. So e4. So it's e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4. So this is, of course, the Gyoko piano if nothing changes in the move or the succeeding move order. And bishop c5, c3, knight f6, and we have d4, capture, capture. No, Magnus did not immediately recapture. Yeah, no, sorry. Wesley So did not immediately recapture at d4. He made the move e5, which is the variation that's better, I think. And we have here d5 and bishop uh, b5. So the pawn at the knight at f6 is still being threatened, so it has to move. Okay, so knight e4 and then recapture. So we have the recapture now. Okay, so bishop b6 instead of bishop b4 and knight c3 and castling for Magnus, and we have here bishop e3. So this, I think this is still fairly standard variation in this opening. And bishop g4, pinning the knight. Okay, so what Wesley did here is to remove his queen immediately from the pin. So he's basically saying it's okay if you double my pawn there by capturing on f3 with the bishop. What's important for me is that I would castle. There is a possibility of him castling queen side, and Wesley would have this open file in the G file. But at this point, Magnus did not capture in f3. So what he did is to put his bishop for an extra attack against the queen here. Okay, and Wesley removed remove the queen from that very dangerous possible extra attack. Of course, there is a threat of knight g3. So that's what happened in game 1. And let's go to game 3. Basically the same opening but with some deviations for Wesley because he does not want to repeat that loss. Okay, we have here e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, c3, knight f6, d4, takes, and then e5, and then the same d5, and then the same again, bishop d5, and then knight e4, and capture, and bishop b6. So basically the same up to this point, up to the 8th move, and knight c3, and castling, and bishop e3, and then bishop g4, and instead of putting the queen at c2, uh, Wesley goes for h3, immediately attacking the bishop. So what would Magnus do here? Just move the bishop to h5, and then Wesley goes for rook c1. So this is the difference between what happened. So let's proceed with again with game 1 and what happened with game 1. So we have here queen b3, and we have knight to e7 and castling, and now we have c6 attacking the bishop. Okay, bishop e2, and then we have here rook b8, so protecting the pawn at b7 in case the bishop at b6 moves to another square. And we have here knight a4. I think this is the start of the problem for Wesley because this knight start to be misplaced. It would be misplaced. Okay, so principle of the opening is always have your pieces at the center. But of course, these are the top players. They know when to violate the principle or to not comply with the principle. But maybe on a higher level, this has been a miscalculation at the level of the super grandmasters. So okay, we have that. And bishop c7. So the pawn at b7 is now protected. This is bishop c7 and the b7 pawn is protected by the rook. Okay, we have here knight h4. So this is the start of a very uh, what you call this, a critical juncture of the game wherein Magnus made a very controversial to say, but a good a move with a very good idea. So we have here f6. Actually, even if I think I'm handling if I'm handling white here, this move would make me very uncomfortable because it would allow black to open up the position for this rook at f8. Okay, so that's f6, and what happened next is bishop uh, f3. I think this is the critical part of the miscalculation by Wesley. I think it's better to capture here at f5, but of course these are super grandmasters. Maybe they have seen things that I don't see or is unable to see. But nevertheless, this would prove later to be a miscalculation or a strategic error by Wesley. So bishop f3. We have now here b5. This b5 really forces things to for Wesley to do something with this knight. What would you do with this knight? So Wesley could choose to take on this f5, the knight f5, and this knight would have to move, and black could capture at e5 with the pawn at f6, and it would open up the position. So what happened here is, let's just go through it very fast. Takes, and then instead of capturing at c3, Wesley took on f6. I think it's another miscalculation because the queen could make a threat like queen d6. So there's a lot of possibilities now for the black position. Actually, the bishop at c7 suddenly came to life with this voluntary opening up of the position by Wesley. So what happened next is, instead of recapturing on f6 by the rook, Magnus just allows uh, the capture on e7. Okay. Anyway, he is already ahead by one piece because Wesley have not yet recaptured on c3. So bishop e4, and then we have here captured by Wesley on uh, c3. Actually, it's not really that bad for Magnus if Wesley would decide to capture first with here, because actually still Magnus is attacking a piece here, which is the knight at, as you can see, the knight at h4 has nowhere to go. So it's still okay if that would be the case. Okay, so this is the move that has been done. Okay, so and then still Magnus ignores the threat on e7. This is what I'm talking about earlier. The bishop at c7 is already alive with this position because the pawn at e5 have gone to f6. So queen d6, and this is a forced move, of course, g3 here, and then bishop bishop takes on f3, and instead of recapturing with the knight, Wesley decides to go for bishop f4. So what happens next is that the queen captures on f6. Uh, as you can see here, Magnus allows the c7 bishop to be captured. For him, it doesn't matter because he is still ahead, or the position, the number of pieces would still be even, and he calculated that the position would be quiz advantage. So what happens next is that a capture on c7 was made by Wesley. Then we have here rook to b7. So the rook is now prepared to go to f7 at a later part of the game. Okay, so we have here bishop e5 attacking the queen, and Magnus just calmly moved to f7 with queen f7. Actually, let's make a little backgrounder of the game here. Magnus is already like 1 minute here, and Wesley still has some 4 minutes. But Magnus has worked everything at this point. He has already calculated everything. So that is why the position is so easy for him. So as you can see, the time here, this is inaccurate. This is not the actual time in the game. You can see the actual time in the live commentaries, live coverage by Chess24. So this is what happened. Queen f7, and we have here a capture on f3, and of course, Magnus also captured that f3 knight. So we have here Wesley going to making the move queen b4, and this would prove later to be a a bad move because the queen would be out of play. So we can see what happens next, and here Wesley attacks the pawn at c6, but it is of no moment or no significance anymore. But because at this point all the pieces of Magnus Carlsen is directed towards the attack on the king, on Wesley's king. And by capturing on c6, the queen would just misplace itself. Anyway, at this point, the queen has no better way of coming back to the game. Every square that would allow the queen to go back and help in the defense of the king is really black or uh, cannot be secured anymore. So we have here rook a e1 by Wesley, and we have here an attack with h5. So the pawn is now helping out in the attack of the white king. So everything is coming to bear against the king of Wesley here. Okay, we have here f3. I'm thinking of h4 at this point, but I think it would also prove fatal later on. So we can have g5, and the attack would continue with h4. So I really haven't worked it out, but I think no matter what Wesley does at this point, he is already lost. Okay, we have here h4. So as you can see here, if g3 captures on h4, then we have knight h4, and mate cannot be prevented at the g2 square. So what happens next is Wesley captures that. It's really not a, this move is just like saying pass. Wesley has no good move, just make any move here. Okay, we have here a sacrifice uh, at g3. So this sacrifice is better because it connects all the forces behind the knight. Look at this, the queen and the two rooks at the background. It's like a battering ram. There's three heavy pieces attacking this file or controlling this file. By removing the knight, it's actually threatening if the pawn at f2 captures on, for example, here, what was done here is that I think at this point Wesley resigned or not yet. If not yet, he didn't resign yet. So this is the move by Wesley. What if we make this move? Then there's checkmate already. Okay, there's checkmate at this point. Okay, so capturing with the pawn is not really the correct solution at that point. So we have here, so the bishop is the one that captured and the pawn, and we have here a very strong attack uh, by Wesley. Okay, so there's the defense by Wesley. He thinks he can deduct some pieces from the attack. But a very ingenious move from Magnus is G2. So capture by Wesley, capture is really of no significance here. He resigned. He resigned at this point because there is, if this rook moves, then we have here uh, queen takes f2 check. For example, Wesley does this move here. So what would happen? Magnus would just calmly go to h8. There is no check for Magnus here because the h6 square is protected by the pawn. So this is a forced move. Then after that, we have this one. And if the king goes here, then we have checkmate here. Checkmate. Okay? So that's what happened. Actually, the game was already resigned at this point. Wesley resigned at this point. So that's what happened at game 1. However, on game 3, Wesley strikes back. Just like an empire strikes back. So we have here rook c. Let's go to it again fast. Okay, we have the same opening except for this h3 move. Then rook c1. It changes the complexion of the game. Okay. So the same thing as in game 1, Magnus would try to open up the position with this move f6. But of course, Wesley came prepared for that. Okay. So because the bishop was exchanged at g6, this g6 square would later become weak and subject to attack. Okay. So by Wesley taking on this g5, Magnus would be forced to recapture here. So he would now have a triple pawn in one file, not just a double pawn, but a triple pawn. Okay, Magnus did not decide to defend that. I think he should have defended that pawn. So we have here a capture by Wesley on g6. So this is the exact opposite of game 1, wherein as you can see here on the left, Magnus has a battery of heavy pieces in this F file. And in this third game, it's now Wesley who has a battery of heavy pieces on the F file. Okay, so we have rook cf1 and capture, capture. And the rook attacks the queen. Of course, the queen has to pull back. And we have here, I think the queen would go to a3 in order to attack. The rook would go to a3 to attack Wesley's queen at d3. So we have now a break. And of course, rook a3 and queen g6. And this move actually places the rook at h3. I think it's also dangerous for Wesley if he won't be able to handle this. For example, if the queen would be able to go to the other side, then there's a very strong attack on the h file. But of course, Wesley at this point is already ahead and he won't allow that. So rook h3, and instead of capturing here, which would allow the exchange of the rooks, Wesley just proceeds with f5, and we have king going to the h file to avoid being pinned with f6, and still f6 for Wesley. Exchange, and I think this is the position that Magnus did not see or was not able to calculate, or maybe he calculated it but he sees no solution or no defense against it. He just tried to make the move queen h7, hoping that Wesley would make a different move. But the killer move here is queen g7. So basically, it is forced. At this point, of course, Magnus resigned, and as you can see, if Magnus captures in that, there's a check, and at the same time, an attack by the battery of rooks, heavy pieces on the f file on the black rook at f8. But the black rook at f8 cannot capture in f2 right now because there's a check. So first, Carlsen has to deal with this check, and of course, the rook would be lost. So at this point, Magnus would not stand a chance against Wesley in this type of position. So Magnus resigned, having seen this thing happening against him. So congratulations to Wesley So for having tied the match uh, at this point and having drawn the fourth game, so that after match number one, the score is tied and he has a better chance of against Magnus in match number two tonight, because he won't take any risky opening, any risk taking that is unnecessary, because the score is a tie. So uh, really, if you are in a must win situation, your calculations and your opening choices will change. But this would not happen to Wesley because the game is tied. The match is tied. So thank you for watching this video of mine. I hope you would subscribe by clicking the red subscribe button and clicking on the bell notification, so that you would be notified of new videos from Pinoy Chess.